Over the past several days, News First presented information on the freedom struggle in Sri Lanka and the heroes who gave leadership to that struggle after Sri Lanka became a colony of the British Empire. 100 years later, in 1915, the country experienced one of its darkest chapters.
At the beginning of the 20th century, a leadership was born to lead the local population against English rule. In 1915, this rising was dealt a death blow. This blow was struck in the form of the Sinhala Muslim riots. The mosque on Ambagamu Road in Gampula was the starting point for this dark chapter. This confrontational situation arose when the Perahara of the Sri Kataragama Dewalaya in Wallahagoda passed before the mosque. Using these incidents as an excuse, the English took measures to imprison the leadership of the freedom struggle. What really happened that day? To find out, we travelled to Gampula to visit the current generation of those factions. This is the grandson of an individual who gave leadership to the Muslim faction.
දවස්වල අපේ රට පාලනය කරපු සුද්දන්ගේ ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ තැන රැක ගැනීම සඳහා.
At the time, the British attempted to create divisions amongst the Sri Lankan residents in order to protect their position. The incident which took place at the town mosque down Ambugama Road in Gampula in 1915 is a good example. The unity in which the Sinhala Muslim and Tamil individuals lived in Gampula was destroyed by the British.
ටවුන් පල්ලියේ සිදුවීම. එදා සිංහල මුස්ලිම් දෙමළ ජනතාව ගම්පල වාසය කරපු එක්සත්භාවය නැති කරේ සුද්දා.
The other faction was represented by the Wallahagoda Vihara.
915 ඇතිවෙච්ච තත්ත්වය නිසා
There are no differences between the Sinhala and Muslim individuals today, which was created as a result of the incident which took place in 1915. According to my opinion, the reason for this is that those who were involved in it were not the traditional Muslim community in Sri Lanka.
Today marks Navam Full Moon Poya Day. Buddhists mark this day with much devotion as several significant events in the Buddhist calendar had taken place on a day like today.
The first congregation of Mahasangha or the first Buddhist council was held on a day like this. The first Buddhist council was held 3 months after the passing away of the Buddha. Meanwhile, the appointment of 2 chief disciples of the Buddha, Sariyut and Mugalan, also took place on Navam Full Moon Poya Day.
Deputy Leader of the United National Party, Sajith Premadasa, states that the government, which cannot afford to provide school uniforms for students, is staging carnivals. Premadasa made this statement at a program held in Tismaharama this afternoon.
Children in Kohomagaha Palace, Tisamaharama were granted savings account books and school equipment by UNP Deputy Leader Sajith Premadasa today under the Janasuya program. We have a wondrous government in our country which has as yet failed to provide school uniforms. They can't provide school uniforms, but they can afford to go around the country and stage carnivals and the Dayata Kirula. The people of this country will one day vest power in a Premadasa once again. I am stating to you that when that day comes, children will receive not 1 uniform but 2, a pair of shoes, school bag, books and other equipment.
Teachers' unions and the opposition charge that the government has failed to distribute school uniforms for this year.
The government has allocated 1,600 million rupees for uniforms for students at schools and Pirivenas this year. Teachers' unions say children should have received these uniforms by November or December. If funds have been allocated and uniforms have to be distributed, then why are they not being distributed? This is a responsibility of the Minister of Education. We know that the Minister has commenced large projects for propaganda, but he cannot meet basic needs. In 2011, the same thing happened. Throughout the year, uniforms were not distributed. Due to the delay in providing uniforms, a large amount of children in the country, especially children and parents in rural areas, have been severely inconvenienced. We are stating clearly that this is a threat to free education. The best example is the failure to distribute school uniforms on time in 2011. Not only that, when questions were raised in Parliament, the subject minister was unable to answer. This is a disappointing situation. Whenever this allegation was levelled, the government tries to answer it somehow. The government is trying to cover up the large crisis in the Ministry of Education as a whole by showing bridges and culverts.
We made inquiries from the Deputy Minister of Education, Vijit Wijemunisoiza, regarding the allegations being levelled by teachers' unions and political parties.
We will not delay in providing school uniforms. Students will not attend school without being dressed in the school attire. Parents must be thinking that they need to bear small shortcomings and lapses on behalf of this government. We are committed to working with the students by making them partners in the process of building the country. We are hoping to provide these uniform materials to relevant schools via zonal officers by next month.
Climatic and weather changes and increased seismic activity have severely affected several nations across the globe. Extreme cold, floods and earthquakes have taken centre stage, and massive loss of life has been reported over the past several days alone.
Aftershocks following a 6.7 magnitude quake off Negros Island in central Philippines triggered fear among residents of nearby Cebu Island. Conflicting reports have surfaced on the number of dead reported following the quake. However, international news agencies report that the number of dead stands at 48, while the official figures put the number of dead at 15. Several remote towns have been cut off because of damage to roads and bridges. Aftershocks rattled the region with more than 700 of them in the 20 hours after the quake struck, a seismology institute said, and officials warned residents to have their houses checked if they had been damaged. People slept on the road and inside vehicles with their children, evacuating their homes in anxiety over more tremors and possible landslides. In Serbia, where tens of thousands of people remain cut off due to severe weather conditions, the government declared a state of emergency across the country the day before. Temperatures are forecast to stay below zero until mid-February, but the government said it was already preparing for the big melt and possible floods. In addition to the existing resources, the government will mobilize additional machinery from private and state-run enterprises to open roads and clear snow. Earlier, a state of emergency was declared in 37 municipalities in Serbia. 10 people have been killed because of the cold. The Balonne River reached a new record high in the town of St. George in Queensland, Australia today, but did not breach an earth levee hastily constructed along its banks to keep the rising water from flooding the area. Around 2,500 people were forced from their homes by the threat of rising water levels at the weekend, although some residents stayed to protect their property. Forecasts had predicted water levels in the Balonne reaching 15 meters, but in the end the river reached a new record depth of 14 meters. The authorities expect levels to start receding tomorrow. The only large-scale ski resort in Tokamachi in central Japan's Niigata prefecture has been forced to close after heavy snowfall caused the collapse of its ski equipment warehouse. No injuries have so far been reported in this accident. All the ski equipment and office supplies stored in the warehouse are now buried under the rubble and snow, leaving only the collapsed structure's roof above the ground. Although Japan, Australia and the Philippines are facing extreme weather conditions, most of the Asian region has been mercifully spared for the moment. Meanwhile, in Sri Lanka, as the northeastern monsoon season sets in, the northern, eastern and over provinces and the eastern faces of the central hills can expect increased rainfall.
In related news, a Sri Lankan has died due to the extremely cold weather situation in Italy. The deceased has been identified as Anthony Nishantakumara, who was previously a resident of Negombo. The deceased, Anthony Nishantakumara, was a resident of the Lucca area in Italy. Nishanta, who is married, is a father of 3. Nishanta, who arrived in Italy around 11 years ago, resides there with his children and wife. His wife has informed their relatives in Sri Lanka that the final rites of Nishanta are scheduled to take place tomorrow.
And tonight on our special segment 13 Plus, we look at the stance of the left front on devolution of power.
Idea of devolution arises because of there is a majority and a minority. A majority nation and a minority nations or nationalities of several. The idea is to incorporate their self-rule with the majority rule and to bring about a federal type of state. The federal content of the constitution can change depending on the strength of the devolution. But devolution is primarily necessary to bring you together to centrifugal tendencies that arises because of chauvinist pogroms and other racist attacks. And the only solution is to have a proper devolution and satisfy the Tamil majority and bring them together with others and have a federal type of state in this country.